I thought helping a crying child in the mall would just ruin my lunch break. Little did I know it would completely transform my entire life. If you're ready for an incredible story, hit that like button and subscribe for more. My name is Sloan, and 3 months ago, I was just another face in the crowd at Westfield Valley Fair, clutching my phone and rushing through my 30-minute lunch break from the insurance office where I worked as a claims adjuster. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as I weaved between families with strollers and teenagers clustered around the GameStop entrance. I had exactly 15 minutes to grab a sandwich from Subway and get back before my supervisor started her passive-aggressive comments about punctuality. That's when I heard it. A sound that cut through the mall's ambient noise like a knife. A child crying. Not the typical whining you hear from kids who want a toy, but genuine, heart-wrenching sobs that spoke of real fear and confusion. I paused near the fountain in the center court, scanning the area until I spotted him. A little boy, maybe 4 years old, standing alone near the Macy's entrance. His dark hair was perfectly styled, and he wore a navy blue polo shirt that probably cost more than my weekly grocery budget. My first instinct was to keep walking. Surely his parents were nearby, right? Someone would notice him soon enough. But as seconds ticked by and shoppers continued past him like he was invisible, something in my chest tightened. The boy's sobs grew louder, and I could see his small shoulders shaking. I approached him slowly, crouching down to his eye level about 3 feet away. "Hey there, buddy," I said softly, not wanting to frighten him further. "Are you okay?" He looked up at me with the biggest brown eyes I'd ever seen, tears streaming down his cheeks. "I can't find my mommy," he hiccuped. "She was right there, and then she wasn't." My heart melted. "What's your name, sweetheart?" "Oliver," he whispered, wiping his nose with the back of his hand. "Oliver Montgomery." "Okay, Oliver. I'm Sloan, and I'm going to help you find your mommy, all right?" I glanced around, noting how the Montgomery name sounded vaguely familiar, though I couldn't place why. "Can you tell me what your mommy looks like?" "She has long brown hair like yours, and she smells like flowers. She was wearing a white dress and talking on her phone." Oliver's description could have fit dozens of women in the mall, but at least it was a start. I pulled out my phone to check the time. My lunch break was already half over, but there was no way I was leaving this kid alone. "Oliver, do you know your mommy's phone number?" He shook his head, fresh tears threatening to spill over. That's when I noticed the small crowd that had begun to gather. People slowing down to stare but not stopping to help. A few pulled out their phones, and I realized they were taking pictures or videos of the situation. The thought made my stomach turn. "Hey!" I said firmly to the nearest phone-wielding teenager. "Put that away. This is a scared child, not entertainment." The kid rolled his eyes but pocketed his phone. I turned back to Oliver, who had moved closer to me, clearly seeking comfort. Without thinking, I gently placed my hand on his small shoulder. "Oliver, I think we should go to the security office. They have ways to find lost mommies, okay?" I kept my voice calm and reassuring, even though internally I was running through all the protocols I'd learned from watching crime shows. Never leave the area where you got separated. Let the authorities handle it. Don't take the child anywhere alone. But as I stood up and took Oliver's hand, his tiny fingers wrapping around mine with complete trust, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. A man in a baseball cap had been lingering near the jewelry kiosk for several minutes, watching us intently. When our eyes met, he quickly looked away and started walking in the opposite direction. My protective instincts kicked into overdrive. I scooped Oliver up, surprised by how willingly he came to me, and headed straight for the security office near the food court. He wrapped his arms around my neck, and I could feel him trembling slightly. "It's going to be okay," I murmured, though I wasn't entirely sure myself. "We're going to find your mommy." The security office was a small, windowless room with monitors showing various mall angles and a desk cluttered with incident reports. Officer Martinez, a middle-aged man with kind eyes, immediately took charge of the situation. He radioed for additional security to search the mall and began asking Oliver gentle questions about where he'd last seen his mother. "She was at the big store with all the pretty dresses," Oliver said. pointing in the direction of Nordstrom. There were lots of sparkly things. Officer Martinez nodded and made notes. "And you said your last name is Montgomery, son?" "Yes, sir. Oliver James Montgomery. My mommy says I have to tell people my whole name if I ever get lost." I sat in a plastic chair beside Oliver, still holding his hand, when my phone buzzed with a text from my supervisor asking where I was. My lunch break had officially ended 10 minutes ago, but I couldn't bring myself to care. This little boy needed someone right now, and for whatever reason, he had chosen to trust me. That's when the door burst open, and a woman rushed in like a hurricane. She was tall and elegant, with perfectly styled brown hair and wearing exactly the white dress Oliver had described. But what struck me most were her eyes, the same warm brown as Oliver's, but wild with panic and relief. "Oliver!" she cried, dropping to her knees as he ran into her arms. "Oh my God, baby, I was so scared. I'm so sorry. Mommy's here now." I watched the reunion with a mixture of relief and something else I couldn't quite identify. The woman held Oliver like he was the most precious thing in the world, whispering apologies and promises that she'd never let go of his hand again. Finally, she looked up at me, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "You found him. You stayed with him." Her voice was cultured, with just a hint of a southern accent. "I don't know how to thank you. Anyone would have done the same thing," I said, though we both knew that wasn't entirely true. I'd seen plenty of people walk past Oliver without a second glance. She stood up, Oliver still in her arms, and extended her hand to me. "I'm Victoria Montgomery. And you are?" "Sloane Parker." I shook her hand, noting the designer watch and the wedding ring that probably cost more than my car. "Sloane," she repeated, as if committing it to memory. "You have no idea what this means to me. Oliver is my entire world." Officer Martinez cleared his throat. "Mrs. Montgomery, if you could just fill out this incident report, we can get you folks on your way." As Victoria filled out the paperwork, Oliver stayed close to her but kept glancing over at me with a shy smile. When they were done, Victoria reached into her purse, a handbag I recognized from a magazine as costing several $1,000s, and pulled out her wallet. "Please, let me give you something for your trouble," she said, holding out what looked like several $100 bills. I held up my hands. "No, really, I couldn't. I'm just glad he's safe." She studied me for a moment, her expression thoughtful. "Then let me ask you something. What do you do for work, Sloane?" "I'm a claims adjuster at Hartwell Insurance," I said, wondering why she was asking. "And do you enjoy it?" The question caught me off guard. Did I enjoy it? The honest answer was no. I spent my days processing paperwork, dealing with frustrated clients, and working for a boss who treated me like I was replaceable. But it paid the bills and had decent health insurance. "It's stable work," I said diplomatically. Victoria smiled, and there was something knowing in her expression. "Well, Sloane Parker, I have a feeling we're going to see each other again very soon." The next morning started like any other Tuesday. My alarm buzzed at 6:30. I stumbled to the kitchen of my studio apartment for coffee, and I prepared for another day of processing insurance claims in a beige cubicle under fluorescent lights. But as I was getting dressed, my phone rang with an unknown number. "Hello, is this Sloane Parker?" The voice was professional, crisp, with just a hint of the southern accent I remembered from yesterday. "Yes, this is Sloane. This is Catherine Walsh, executive assistant to Victoria Montgomery. Mrs. Montgomery would like to invite you to lunch today at the Garden Court downtown. Would you be available at noon?" I nearly dropped my phone. "I'm sorry, what?" "Mrs. Montgomery was quite impressed by your kindness yesterday and would like to express her gratitude properly. She's also mentioned she may have a business proposition to discuss with you." My mind raced. I had exactly 47 minutes of lunch break, and downtown was at least a 20-minute drive from my office. Plus, the Garden Court was one of those restaurants where appetizers cost more than I typically spent on an entire meal. "I only have a short lunch break," I said hesitantly. "Mrs. Montgomery anticipated that. She's spoken with your supervisor, Mr. David Hartwell, and arranged for you to have an extended lunch today. Everything has been cleared." I sat down hard on my couch. Victoria Montgomery had called my boss. How did she even know where I worked? Then I remembered. I'd told her yesterday. But the fact that she'd gone to the trouble of arranging this, that she had enough influence to get David Hartwell to agree to anything, spoke to a level of power I was only beginning to understand. "Okay," I heard myself saying. "I'll be there." The garden court occupied the top floor of the Meridian Tower, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of the city. I'd walked past this building countless times, but never imagined I'd actually be inside, let alone dining in its most exclusive restaurant. The hostess, a woman who looked like she belonged on a magazine cover, led me to a corner table where Victoria was already seated. She looked different than she had yesterday, more composed, more powerful. Her hair was pulled back in an elegant chignon, and she wore a navy blue blazer that probably cost more than my monthly rent. But when she saw me, her face lit up with the same warmth I'd seen when she'd been reunited with Oliver. "Sloane, thank you so much for coming." She stood to greet me, and I noticed several other diners glancing our way with curious expressions. "Please, sit." I took the liberty of ordering us some champagne to celebrate. "Celebrate what?" I asked, settling into the chair that probably cost more than my couch. "Your new job, of course." I blinked. "I'm sorry." Victoria smiled, that same knowing expression from yesterday crossing her features. "Let me tell you a little about myself, Sloane. My husband and I own Montgomery Enterprises. We have interests in real estate development, technology startups, and venture capital. We also run the Montgomery Foundation, which focuses on education and family services." I nodded, though the names meant nothing to me. Victoria continued, "What we don't have is someone to head our new community outreach initiative. Someone with a genuine heart. Someone who sees a child in need and doesn't hesitate to help, even when it's inconvenient. Mrs. Montgomery, I'm flattered, but I don't have any experience in community outreach or nonprofit work. Experience can be taught, Sloane. Character cannot." She leaned forward slightly. "Yesterday, when you helped Oliver, you didn't know who we were. You didn't know there would be any reward or recognition. You helped because it was the right thing to do. That's exactly the kind of person I need leading this initiative." The server appeared with champagne flutes and a bottle that I was certain cost more than I made in a week. As Victoria spoke about salary, a number that made my head spin, and benefits that included full health care, dental, vision, and a retirement plan that would actually allow me to retire someday, I felt like I was in some kind of dream. The position would involve coordinating with local schools, organizing family support programs, and working directly with families in need. You'd have a team of 5 staff members and an operating budget of $2 million annually. $2 million. I tried to process that number and failed. "Why me?" I asked finally. "Surely you know people with more qualifications, more experience." Victoria was quiet for a moment, turning her champagne flute between her fingers. "Can I tell you something about yesterday that you don't know?" I nodded. When I realized Oliver was missing, I was terrified. Not just as a mother, but because of who we are, the kind of attention our family attracts. I called security immediately, and within minutes, they'd located you and Oliver on the cameras. She paused, meeting my eyes. "Do you know what you were doing when they found you?" I shook my head. "You were sitting on the floor next to Oliver, reading him a story from a children's book you'd bought at the bookstore. You'd spent your own money to comfort a stranger's child, and you were so focused on making him feel better that you didn't even notice the cameras watching you." I remembered now. Oliver had been fascinated by a picture book in the store window, and I ducked in to buy it for him while we waited for security to find his mother. "That book is on Oliver's nightstand now," Victoria continued. "He's asked me to read it to him every night since yesterday, and every time he talks about the nice lady who stayed with him when he was scared." My throat felt tight with emotion. I've spent my entire adult life learning to read people, Sloane. In my world, everyone wants something. Money, connections, access. But you didn't want anything except to help a frightened child. That's rare. That's valuable. And that's exactly what this job requires. She slid a leather portfolio across the table. Everything is in there. Job description, salary, benefits, start date. Take your time to look it over, but I hope you'll say yes. I opened the portfolio with trembling hands. The salary alone was more than double what I was making at Hartwell Insurance. The benefits were better than anything I'd ever imagined. But more than that, the job description spoke to something I'd always felt was missing from my work: the chance to actually make a difference in people's lives. "There's one more thing," Victoria said as I read through the documents. "The position comes with a company car and a housing allowance, since you'll be working with families throughout the metro area." I looked up at her, certain I must have misheard. "A housing allowance? Enough to get you out of that studio apartment and into something more suitable for your new role." She smiled. "I told you, Sloane. Character like yours should be rewarded." As we finished lunch, a meal that was easily the best I'd ever eaten, Victoria told me more about the Foundation's work and her vision for the community outreach program. She spoke passionately about creating support systems for families, about early intervention programs, about making real, lasting change in people's lives. By the time she walked me to the elevator, my head was spinning with possibilities. This was everything I'd ever wanted in a career, but had never dared to hope for. "I know it's a lot to process," Victoria said as we waited for the elevator. "Take a few days to think it over. But Sloane, I want you to know, this isn't charity. This is business. I believe you're the right person for this job, and I think you're going to be extraordinary at it." The elevator arrived, and as the doors opened, she handed me her business card. "Call me when you've made your decision. And Sloane, thank you again for taking care of Oliver. Some moments change everything, don't they?" I spent the rest of that Tuesday afternoon in a daze, mechanically processing insurance claims while my mind raced through everything Victoria had told me. The job offer felt surreal, like something that happened to other people, not to someone like me who'd been grinding through the same routine for the past 3 years. When I got home to my studio apartment that evening, I spread the portfolio contents across my small dining table and read through everything again. The salary was real. The benefits were real. The job description outlined meaningful work that would actually help families, something I'd always dreamed of doing but never thought I could afford to pursue. I called my best friend Maya, who listened with growing excitement as I explained the entire situation. "Are you insane?" she practically shouted through the phone. "This is like winning the lottery, Sloane. You have to take it." "But what if I'm not qualified? What if I mess it up? What if you don't, and you spend the rest of your life wondering what could have been?" Maya countered. "Besides, she specifically chose you. She saw something in you that made her want to offer you this opportunity." That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling of my cramped apartment, thinking about Oliver's trusting brown eyes and Victoria's words about character being more valuable than experience. I thought about my current job, where I felt like a cog in a machine, and compared it to the possibility of work that might actually matter. By morning, I'd made my decision. I called Catherine Walsh first thing and accepted the position. My last day at Hartwell Insurance would be Friday. Victoria had arranged for a quick transition that included a generous severance package to cover the gap between jobs. I would start at the Montgomery Foundation the following Monday. David Hartwell took the news with surprising grace, though I suspected Victoria's influence had something to do with his cooperative attitude. My coworkers were shocked, but supportive, especially when they heard about the salary increase. Everyone wanted to know how I'd managed to land such an incredible opportunity, and when I told them about helping the lost child, several people shook their heads in amazement at the coincidence. But was it really a coincidence? The more I thought about it, the more I realized Victoria had been evaluating me from the moment she walked into that security office. She'd seen something in our interaction that made her believe I could do this job, and she'd acted on it with the kind of decisive confidence that only came from years of success in business. Friday afternoon, as I cleaned out my desk for the last time, I felt a mixture of nostalgia and excitement. This chapter of my life was ending, but something much bigger was beginning. Monday morning, I stood in front of the Montgomery Foundation building downtown, wearing a new navy blue dress I'd bought for the occasion. The building was a restored Victorian mansion that had been converted into office space, with original hardwood floors and tall windows that filled the rooms with natural light. It was nothing like the sterile office environment I was used to. Catherine Walsh met me at the front door, her smile warm and welcoming. "Sloan, we're so excited to have you here. Victoria is in meetings all morning, but she wanted me to get you settled in." My office was on the second floor, with a view of the small garden behind the building. It was larger than my entire studio apartment, with a real wooden desk, built-in bookshelves, and a seating area with 2 comfortable chairs. Fresh flowers sat in a vase on the windowsill. "Victoria thought you might like these," Catherine said, gesturing to the flowers. "They're from Oliver. He picked them out himself." The gesture brought tears to my eyes. I hadn't expected to be so moved by starting a new job, but everything about this felt different from any work experience I'd ever had. Catherine introduced me to my team, 5 dedicated professionals who were as passionate about family services as Victoria had promised. There was Marcus, a former social worker who coordinated with local schools; Jennifer, who managed our partnerships with other nonprofits; David, our financial coordinator; Sarah, who handled program development; and Tom, our community liaison who had grown up in the neighborhoods we served. They welcomed me with genuine warmth and immediately began bringing me up to speed on current projects. We had an after-school tutoring program running in 6 elementary schools, a summer camp for at-risk youth, and a family crisis intervention service that provided everything from emergency food assistance to help with utility bills. "Victoria's vision is comprehensive family support," Marcus explained as we toured the building. "Not just addressing immediate crises, but building long-term stability and opportunities for growth." I spent the morning in meetings, learning about budgets and program outcomes, but what struck me most was how every conversation came back to the families we served. These weren't just numbers on a report, they were real people with real struggles and real successes. Around noon, there was a soft knock on my office door. I looked up to see Victoria standing in the doorway, holding a small hand. "I hope you don't mind the interruption," she said, but someone wanted to say hello. Oliver peeked out from behind his mother's legs, suddenly shy. He was wearing a different polo shirt today, this one light blue, and he carried a small wrapped package. "Hi, Oliver," I said, coming around my desk to crouch down to his level, just like I had that first day. "How are you doing, buddy?" "Good," he said quietly, then held out the package. "I made this for you." Inside was a drawing of 2 stick figures, one tall with long brown hair, one small, standing next to what I assumed was the mall fountain. At the top, in careful preschooler letters, he'd written, "Thank you, Sloan. Oliver, this is beautiful, thank you so much." I looked up at Victoria, who was watching our interaction with soft eyes. "Would it be okay if I hung this up in my office?" Oliver nodded enthusiastically, his shyness disappearing. "Mommy says you're going to help lots of kids now, like you helped me." "I'm going to try my best," I told him honestly. After they left, I taped Oliver's drawing to the wall next to my desk, right where I could see it every day. It would serve as a reminder of why I was here, of the moment that had changed everything. The rest of my first week flew by in a blur of meetings, site visits, and orientation sessions. I met with school principals, visited family service centers, and began to understand the scope of the work we were doing. By Friday afternoon, I felt simultaneously overwhelmed and energized. This was challenging work, but it was meaningful in a way my previous job had never been. Victoria stopped by my office at the end of the day, carrying 2 cups of coffee from the cafe down the street. "How was your first week?" she asked, settling into one of the chairs in my seating area. "Incredible." "Overwhelming." "Perfect," I said, accepting the coffee gratefully. "I can't believe this is actually my job now. How do you feel about the apartments Catherine showed you?" Catherine had taken me to see 3 different apartments that afternoon, all within my new housing allowance budget. After years in my cramped studio, the idea of having a real bedroom, a full kitchen, and actual living space felt like luxury beyond imagination. "The one on Maple Street is perfect," I said. "I can't believe I'll be able to afford something like that." Victoria smiled. Good choices should be rewarded, Sloane. You made a good choice when you helped Oliver, and I made a good choice when I hired you. I can already see you're going to be exceptional at this work. As she prepared to leave, she paused at my door. By the way, we have our annual foundation gala next month. It's our biggest fundraising event of the year, and I'd love for you to attend. It would be a good opportunity for you to meet our major donors and community partners. After she left, I sat in my beautiful new office, looking out at the garden and thinking about how dramatically my life had changed in just 1 week. 7 days ago, I'd been processing insurance claims in a beige cubicle. Now I was heading up a community outreach program with a budget of $2 million and the opportunity to make real change in people's lives. All because I'd chosen to help a scared little boy instead of walking away. 3 weeks later, I stood in front of my bathroom mirror in my new apartment, trying to calm my nerves as I prepared for the Montgomery Foundation Gala. The event was being held at the Grand Ballroom of the Fairmont Hotel, and Catherine had made it clear that this was the social event of the year for the city's philanthropic community. My reflection stared back at me, wearing a black dress I'd found on sale at Nordstrom Rack. Still the most expensive piece of clothing I'd ever owned. The apartment behind me was everything I'd dreamed of. Hardwood floors, a real kitchen with granite counters, a bedroom with space for an actual bed instead of a futon, and a living room where I could entertain friends. The past 3 weeks had been a whirlwind of learning and growth. I'd visited every school in our tutoring program, met with dozens of families, and started developing new initiatives based on what I was seeing in the community. The work was challenging but fulfilling in ways I'd never experienced before. Marcus had become an invaluable mentor, teaching me the ins and outs of nonprofit administration and helping me navigate the complex web of community partnerships. Jennifer had shown me how to write grant proposals, while Sarah had taught me program evaluation techniques. Every day brought new challenges and new opportunities to learn. But tonight felt different. Tonight, I would be representing the foundation in front of the city's most influential donors and community leaders. Victoria had spent time preparing me for this, explaining who would be there and what the foundation hoped to accomplish. But I still felt the weight of responsibility on my shoulders. The Fairmont's Grand Ballroom was transformed into an elegant wonderland of soft lighting, floral arrangements, and silent auction displays. Round tables draped in cream linens filled the space, each set with gleaming china and crystal glasses. A small orchestra played classical music while guests in evening wear mingled and examined the auction items. I found my assigned table near the front of the room, where Victoria had seated me with other foundation staff and board members. She looked stunning in a deep blue gown that probably cost more than my monthly salary, but her warm smile when she saw me was the same one I remembered from that first day. "Sloane, you look beautiful," she said, giving me a brief hug. "How are you feeling?" "Nervous," I admitted. "I'm not used to events like this." "You'll be fine. Just be yourself. That's why you're here." As the evening progressed, I found myself in conversations with donors, board members, and community leaders who were genuinely interested in the foundation's work and my role in it. Victoria had been right. Being authentic and passionate about the mission was more important than having all the right social graces. During dinner, Victoria stood to address the crowd. She spoke eloquently about the foundation's accomplishments over the past year, highlighting specific families who had been helped and children who had succeeded in our programs. When she mentioned the Community Outreach Initiative and introduced me to the audience, I felt a surge of pride and determination. Our newest team member, Sloane Parker, brings fresh perspective and genuine heart to this work, Victoria said, gesturing toward me. In just 3 weeks, she's already identified new opportunities for impact and begun building bridges with community partners we've never worked with before. The applause was warm and encouraging, and I felt some of my nervousness evaporate. These people weren't judging me. They were supporting the work we were all committed to. After dinner, during the auction portion of the evening, I found myself standing near the silent auction tables when a familiar voice spoke behind me. "Excuse me, are you the lady who helped my son at the mall?" I turned to see a tall man with Oliver's brown eyes and dark hair, wearing an impeccably tailored tuxedo. This had to be Victoria's husband, though we'd never been formally introduced. "You must be Oliver's father," I said, extending my hand. "I'm Sloane Parker." "James Montgomery," he said, shaking my hand with a firm grip. "I've heard so much about you from both Victoria and Oliver. I can't thank you enough for what you did that day. Anyone would have done the same thing." He smiled, and I could see where Oliver got his charm. "Victoria said you'd say that, but we both know it's not true. Lots of people walked past my son that day before you stopped to help." James and I talked for several minutes about the Foundation's work and my experiences so far. He was clearly as passionate about their philanthropic efforts as Victoria was, but he had a more analytical approach that complemented her visionary leadership perfectly. "Victoria has excellent instincts about people," he said as our conversation wound down. "When she told me she wanted to hire you based on one interaction, I'll admit I was skeptical. But seeing the work you've accomplished in such a short time, I understand why she was so certain." As the evening drew to a close, the auction results were announced. The foundation had raised over $800,000, money that would fund expanded programming and reach even more families in need. I felt incredibly proud to be part of an organization that could inspire such generous support. Victoria found me as guests were beginning to leave, her eyes bright with satisfaction at the evening's success. "So, how was your first foundation gala?" she asked. "Amazing. I'm starting to understand the scope of what we're able to accomplish with this kind of community support. There's something I want to show you," she said, leading me toward the auction display area. "Do you remember the children's book you bought for Oliver that day at the mall?" I nodded. "Well, Oliver has become quite the reader since then. In fact, he's decided he wants to write his own book about helping people." She smiled. "James and I have been talking, and we'd like to fund a new literacy initiative as part of your community outreach program. Reading programs, book donations, maybe even a mobile library to reach families who can't get to traditional library locations." The possibilities immediately began spinning through my mind. I thought about the families I'd met over the past few weeks, many of whom struggled to provide educational resources for their children. "That could make such a difference," I said, excitement building in my voice. "We could partner with the schools, create reading groups for parents and children together, maybe even develop workshops for families who want to support their children's literacy at home." "Exactly the kind of thinking I was hoping for," Victoria said. "I'll have Catherine set up meetings with our education consultants next week. This could be the flagship program that really sets our community outreach initiative apart." As I drove home that night, still wearing my elegant dress and thinking about literacy programs and mobile libraries, I marveled at how completely my life had transformed. 3 months ago, I'd been struggling to make ends meet in a job that felt meaningless. Now I was heading up meaningful programs with the resources to make real change in people's lives. It all started with one decision: to help a scared little boy instead of walking away. That moment of compassion had opened doors I never could have imagined, but more than that, it had revealed possibilities within myself that I hadn't known existed. I thought about Oliver's drawing on my office wall, with its careful letters spelling out, "Thank you, Sloane." But the truth was, I was the one who should be grateful. Grateful for the reminder that small acts of kindness can change everything. Grateful for the opportunity to do work that mattered. And grateful for the chance to build a life I could be truly proud of. As I pulled into the parking space at my beautiful new apartment, I smiled thinking about Monday morning and all the possibilities that lay ahead. Sometimes the most important moments in our lives start with the simplest choice. To care about someone else, even when it's inconvenient, even when there's no reward in sight, even when it's just the right thing to do. My life had been transformed by helping one lost child, but in the process, I'd discovered that I'd been lost too, and now I'd found exactly where I belonged.